Sometimes, the life you build with love becomes the very thing that breaks you. Trust is a fragile thing, easily given, quietly broken, and almost impossible to reclaim once shattered. Pregnant wife catches billionaire husband cheating. Divorces by phone, and becomes a boss abroad. You won't believe how quickly a dream life can collapse. Elena Martinez genuinely thought she had it all. She had a devoted husband she adored, a glittering life of unimaginable luxury, and a beautiful baby on the way. The hushed whispers of his infidelity buzzing through high society seemed entirely unreal, a cruel fiction born of jealousy, until the fateful day she saw it all with her own two eyes, in a single, devastating moment that shattered absolutely everything she held dear. Elena's curated world violently collapsed beneath her feet. Her trusting heart was shattered into a million jagged pieces. But her core spirit stayed remarkably strong. She bravely walked away from the massive corporate empire she had tirelessly helped him build, fiercely determined to carve out her own unique destiny. This is the gripping, emotional story of profound heartbreak and incredible reinvention. It is the story of a pregnant wife who absolutely refused to be broken, and instead, triumphantly, became her own legend. Elena Martinez was raised in a very modest, loving home tucked away in the quiet suburbs of Austin, Texas. Her devoted parents, Rafael and Carmen Martinez, were hardworking, proud immigrants from Colombia, deeply committed to giving their children every single educational and social opportunity they had never had themselves. Elena embraced their grand vision for her life wholeheartedly. From a very young age, she excelled brilliantly in rigorous academics, expressive painting, and competitive athletics. She was the rare kind of girl who could beautifully light up a blank canvas with one hand and effortlessly win a grueling track sprint with the other. Her dark ponytail swayed energetically as she expertly juggled demanding schoolwork, varsity sports, and her deep creative passions. By the time she proudly entered college at the prestigious Georgetown University, she had a crystal clear, ambitious plan laid out for her future. She fiercely dreamed of studying international affairs, maybe even joining a powerful global organization like the UN to effect real change. But life, with its unpredictable currents, had its own thrilling and highly dangerous course in store for her. It was during her junior year at Georgetown where she first crossed paths with Damian Whitmore. He was a tall, strikingly magnetic figure with an unmistakable, heavy air of wealth and confidence. Damian was already very well known around the historic campus for his incredibly sharp, entrepreneurial mind and his prominent family's immense global fortune. His grandfather had famously co-founded Whitmore Global, a massive corporate powerhouse spanning lucrative industries from luxury travel to cutting-edge tech development. Damian's raw energy was incredibly magnetic. People were naturally in awe of his fierce intellect, but it was his smooth, effortless charm that truly drew them into his orbit. Elena met him at a high-profile charity fundraiser hosted by her close friend, Lin, who was actively organizing massive textbook donations for education programs in underdeveloped countries. Elena had been cheerfully helping with guest check-in at the busy front table. When she casually glanced up and looked directly into Damien's intense, piercing green eyes, she felt a sudden, electric jolt she simply couldn't explain. He politely introduced himself with smooth, practiced confidence, but hiding just beneath the polite small talk was something highly electric, an instant, magnetic connection she hadn't ever felt before. It was a deep intensity that Elena had never experienced with any other man. Their very first conversation was light and easy. She casually admired the elegant, minimalist design of the event invitation cards, while he sincerely remarked on how passionately and intelligently she spoke about the children's education cause. But looking closely under the surface-level exchanges, it was abundantly clear they had stumbled upon something highly meaningful. By the end of the magical evening, they had excitedly exchanged numbers, shared a few quiet inside jokes, and even planned a romantic date for the following week. Their relationship took off significantly faster than anyone had anticipated. Within mere months, they were absolutely inseparable, flawlessly finishing each other's sentences and laughing loudly over newly shared memories. Elena wasn't just blindly drawn to Damien's immense wealth, although the opulent, candlelit dinners and lavish designer gifts were certainly hard to ignore. It was his brilliant mind, his relentless drive, and the massive, world-changing vision he carried for the future that truly captivated her soul. She could clearly see him, one day brilliantly leading the Whitmore empire, actively guiding it into a brand new age of socially conscious, ethical ventures. Damien, in turn, deeply admired Elena's radiant, unwavering optimism and her effortless, beautiful ability to genuinely connect with people from absolutely every socioeconomic background. Shortly after graduating with top honors, Damien aggressively launched an ambitious tech startup that utilized artificial intelligence to completely optimize global logistics systems. It started off relatively small, just a few brilliant people crowded in a cramped co-working space in Seattle, but it quickly attracted massive venture capital investments, including a highly publicized one from a major firm linked to Marcus Wan. Elena, meanwhile, happily accepted a demanding job at a global nonprofit organization, aggressively pursuing her lifelong passion for impact-driven humanitarian work. But over time, as his company exploded, she found herself increasingly, heavily immersed in Damien's high-powered, fast-paced corporate world. She elegantly accompanied him to massive international tech conferences, comfortably rubbing elbows with A-list celebrities like Jessica Alba and legendary philanthropists like Bill Gates. Their evenings constantly sparkled with flashy red carpets, vintage champagne toasts, and highly exclusive networking taking place behind heavily closed doors. Eventually, recognizing her immense talent, Elena officially took charge of the growing social impact arm of Damien's rapidly expanding company, beautifully merging her pure humanitarian ideals with his growing corporate influence. Together, they were an absolute powerhouse couple in the media, one part sharp-minded, ruthless billionaire, one part deeply compassionate, empathetic, changemaker. Their lavish wedding quickly became the highly anticipated social event of the year, held at the sprawling, picturesque Whitmore family estate in Aspen, Colorado. The exclusive guest list read exactly like a global directory of the absolute elite, powerful politicians, A-list movie stars, and rival tech tycoons. Absolutely everyone wanted a front row seat to witness the union of these two rising, golden stars. Elena's father, Raphael, walked her proudly down the long, flower-strewn aisle with deep pride shining in his eyes, while Carmen wiped away happy tears of joy. Damien's wealthy parents, Edward and Lorraine, watched proudly from the front row, genuinely believing their ambitious son had truly found the absolute perfect life partner. In the warm, golden glow of that beautiful Colorado summer evening, standing beneath a massive, fragrant canopy of white roses, Elena tearfully vowed to love and cherish Damien forever. But the forever she beautifully envisioned was significantly more fragile than she could have ever possibly known. Beneath even the most perfect-looking, curated life, dark shadows can lie in wait, completely ready to violently unravel absolutely everything when the time is right. As Damien's massive corporate empire rapidly expanded across the globe, so did the crushing demands on his personal time and energy. Elena did her absolute best to keep pace with his frantic schedule, but the loving man she once knew intimately seemed to be slowly slipping right through her fingers. It happened gradually, one extended business trip to Asia, one missed anniversary dinner, one unanswered text message at a time. She worked tirelessly, planning date nights to maintain the warm, close emotional connection that had once beautifully defined their relationship. Still, heavy, late-night silences and highly rushed, distracted conversations quickly became their sad new norm. Deep, structural cracks had begun to form in their marriage, highly subtle at first, completely invisible to jealous outsiders. Quiet, nasty whispers about Damien being severely overworked, and dark rumors of his extramarital distractions began to circulate rapidly in the elite social circles they frequented. A wealthy family friend once awkwardly, nervously hinted at seeing Damien at a highly private, exclusive cocktail event looking very cozy with someone who definitely wasn't Elena. She quickly brushed the comment off with a forced laugh, fiercely believing in their solid love, entirely convinced that absolutely no one could possibly know her husband's heart better than she did. But deep down in her core, a very quiet, terrifying voice had started asking difficult questions she absolutely didn't want to answer. For a while, the swirling rumors seemed completely impossible. almost absurd, given their history. And yet, as time would brutally prove, the truth can be far more disturbing and ugly than fiction. Damian Whitmore's meteoric rise from a brilliant Georgetown graduate to a ruthless billionaire CEO was nothing short of legendary. His cutting-edge tech venture, Whitmore Supply Chain Innovations, had aggressively cornered a massive global market that very few competitors had even identified. Massive, global. Retailers like Target, massive e-commerce leaders like ShopSphere, and massive international shipping giants all aggressively vied for his company's logistical insights. Through highly smart, aggressive investments, perfectly timed corporate acquisitions, and a bit of sheer luck, Damian's personal fortune multiplied exponentially by the day. Soon, his handsome face was gracing the glossy covers of Forbes and Fortune magazines, loudly celebrated as the absolute next visionary genius of the tech world. But with every glowing article praising his unmatched business genius, Elena quietly noted exactly how much colder and distant he had become at home. He was incredibly warm, charming, and magnetic in public, but shockingly distant, irritable, and detached in private. Elena, on her end, was completely swept up into a massive tidal wave of luxury that she never could have imagined in her wildest dreams growing up in Texas. She traded in her modest, yet cozy, decorated apartment for Damian's sweeping, multi-million-dollar penthouse overlooking downtown Chicago. Massive, floor-to-ceiling glass windows offered breathtaking, panoramic views of Lake Michigan, shimmering beautifully like a pool of endless dreams. Her absolute favorite space in the massive home was the private library, a peaceful, quiet escape filled with rare, first edition books on philosophy, classic art, and complex geopolitics. Between her exhausting nonprofit work and endless social obligations, Elena often disappeared into that quiet room for hours, happily getting lost in stories that offered a brief respite from the high-speed, chaotic life swirling violently around her. It became her ultimate sanctuary, and sometimes her quiet hiding place from his temper. But with the massive rise in his fortune came a sickening rise in his extravagance. Damian impulsively bought a massive private jet and proudly named it Elena's wings, publicly claiming to the press it was a loving tribute to his beloved wife. Her massive walk-in closet swelled with dozens of custom, hand-sewn gowns from elite Parisian designers, and attending weekly million-dollar charity galas quickly became her exhausting norm. When the Whitmores went out for a simple dinner, it was absolutely always to highly exclusive, Michelin-starred restaurants, places like Elena in Chicago or 11 Madison Park in New York, always arriving with a private driver and a highly discreet, armed entourage of security. Despite the dizzying, suffocating wealth surrounding her daily, Elena fought hard to stay grounded to her roots. She made it a specific point to personally warmly greet every single staff member working in their massive household, From the hard-working cleaning crew to the arrogant sous chef who prepared Damien's gourmet meals, she intimately knew their names, their birthdays, and the names of their children. Her genuine sincerity and deep warmth quickly won her the fierce admiration and unyielding loyalty of absolutely everyone around her. Even Lorraine Whitmore, Damien's incredibly haughty, often reserved, old money mother, eventually warmed up to Elena's heartfelt, genuine nature. For a brief time, it truly seemed like a golden, untouchable era in their marriage. They traveled frequently to Tokyo for massive global tech conferences, taking romantic side trips to Kyoto's ancient, peaceful temples, where they offered silent prayers for their continued blessings. In Paris, where Damien aggressively sought to expand his logistics empire across the European market, they rented a charming, incredibly expensive apartment overlooking the Seine, which quickly became their beloved second home. They routinely entertained foreign diplomats, rival CEOs, and A-list celebrities alike, forming powerful alliances that successfully helped establish Whitmore supply chain innovations as a trusted household name among major global corporations. Amid all this dizzying, non-stop success, Elena joyfully discovered she was pregnant. The incredible news completely overwhelmed her with pure joy. She vividly imagined a small, happy child running through the grand corridors of their Colorado estate, laughing brightly in the warm sun, bearing the absolute best of Damien's brilliant mind and her own nurturing, empathetic soul. Damien was absolutely ecstatic at first. He immediately, fiercely promised top-tier, world-class medical care for her. He personally arranged for her prenatal appointments with a highly renowned specialist, Dr. Samuel Green, at the elite Northwestern Medical Center in Chicago. He even commissioned a lavish, sprawling nursery, sparing no expense, entirely designed by an award-winning celebrity interior designer. But as the pregnancy progressed and her body changed, Elena began to sense a rapidly growing, terrifying distance in Damien. He suddenly started skipping her crucial ultrasound appointments, instead coldly sending his personal executive assistant, Grant, to sit in the waiting room in his place. His supposed business trips to Dubai, London, and Berlin became significantly more frequent, lasting longer, and his explanations grew highly vague. When Elena asked for specific details about his itinerary, Damien waved her off irritably, claiming they were all last-minute emergencies and far too complex for her to understand. Then came the highly suspicious late-night phone calls, the hushed, whispering tones in the hallway, the highly erratic way he'd quickly hang up the phone or lock the screen whenever she quietly entered the room. Elena tried desperately to reason with herself, fighting off the rising panic. Maybe it was just the immense, crushing pressure of rapidly expanding a global empire. Maybe he was just deeply overwhelmed by the terrifying thought of balancing his massive business with impending fatherhood. Then, one rainy afternoon, as she rested quietly in their Paris apartment during a trip, she received a highly disturbing phone call from her old Georgetown friend, Maya Lin. Maya worked in elite venture capital and often moved seamlessly in the exact same wealthy, exclusive circles as the Whitmores. In a highly hesitant, uncomfortable tone, Maya mentioned hearing persistent, ugly rumors about Damien's inappropriate closeness to a young, beautiful socialite. Her name was Celeste Laurent, a notoriously wild heiress with a flair for high fashion design and a reputation for chasing married billionaires. Vicious whispers claimed they'd been seen acting incredibly intimately together at an exclusive VIP rooftop event in Paris, just the two of them, lingering closely together long after the rest of the crowd had thinned out. Elena felt a massive, tight squeeze of panic in her chest, but she quickly brushed it off, nervously reminding Maya that fake rumors were the absolute bread and butter of trashy tabloid journalism, especially when it came to high-profile, wealthy marriages. But this specific rumor felt highly different. It wasn't wild or outrageous, it was just highly plausible enough to hurt deeply. Still, she couldn't completely shake the nauseating unease settling in her stomach. The toxic seed of doubt had been firmly planted, and now it began to aggressively weave itself into all her daily thoughts. She began obsessively recalling small, seemingly insignificant moments from the past few months. The faint, red trace of lipstick on Damien's white collar, he'd irritably insisted it was left over from a kiss she gave him earlier that morning, a kiss she absolutely didn't recall sharing, or the numerous times he claimed to be utterly exhausted after long, grueling board meetings, but came home oddly energized, laughing quietly to himself while texting, with a smugness she couldn't quite place. He frequently came home smelling heavily of a sweet, floral cologne she absolutely hadn't gifted him. He'd suddenly started locking his phone with a new passcode, changed his email passwords, and constantly left the room to take private calls. All small things, until they weren't. One by one, these glaring inconsistencies began to stack up rapidly in her mind, exactly like pieces of a dark puzzle, slowly, horrifyingly forming an ugly image she desperately didn't want to see. Yet, Elena was fiercely determined not to fall into a pit of hysterical suspicion entirely without hard evidence. She had personally witnessed far too many high society relationships violently implode from baseless paranoia and gossip. Besides, this was Damien, her loving husband, her partner, the man who had once sworn eternal, unconditional devotion to her. Beneath a canopy of white roses and aspen, she desperately reminded herself of all the noble causes they championed together, the heartfelt, shared laughter, and the beautiful, private moments that had once perfectly defined their love story. Could it all really have been a massive lie? Had he actually already started building an entirely separate, secret life, one she had absolutely no access to. No say in, and no knowledge of? No, she told herself firmly, wiping a tear. There has to be another, logical, explanation for his behavior. But as Elena would very soon learn the hard way, logic often has absolutely little power in the devastating face of betrayal, especially when it comes directly from the one person who vowed to love and protect you the most. The horrifying moment of absolute truth arrived in a highly traumatic way she never, ever could have foreseen. Elena was exactly 5 months pregnant, her belly now beautifully, gently curved, beneath the soft, expensive fabric of a designer maternity dress. She had flown back to Chicago highly unexpectedly, following a short, quiet visit to her parents in Austin, feeling a sudden, deep need to reconnect with her familial roots and find some peace. Damien firmly believed she'd be away in Texas for another 2 full days, which gave her a sweet, spontaneous idea to fix their rift. She cheerfully decided to surprise him with a highly romantic, intimate dinner at home, just the two of them, happily celebrating the little life growing inside her. After explicitly instructing the household staff to prepare Damien's absolute favorite meal, a roasted rack of lamb with fresh rosemary and garlic, Elena picked up a massive, beautiful bouquet of deep red roses from the local high-end florist. She also thoughtfully stopped by a famous boutique patisserie to grab a specialty, expensive fruit tart and opera, his absolute favorite dessert. With an excited, hopeful flutter in her chest, she made her way quickly toward their towering penthouse. She spent the elevator ride happily imagining the look of absolute surprise and joy on Damien's handsome face when he saw her standing there. But what she found instead when she opened the door would be violently burned into her memory forever. The massive penthouse was oddly, terrifyingly quiet when Elena stepped inside. She had fully expected to see their head butler, Julian, bustling about the kitchen, or at least hear some soft, relaxing jazz music playing through the sound system in the background. But the heavy silence felt incredibly thick, almost eerie. She set the massive bouquet of red roses very gently on the polished marble entryway table and moved incredibly quietly down the long hallway toward the master bedroom, drawn by the faint, unmistakable sound of hushed voices. The heavy bedroom door was slightly ajar, just open enough to give her a clear, unobstructed view of something that made the blood run completely cold in her veins. Damien was absolutely not alone in their bed. Standing intimately beside him was a tall, incredibly slender woman with flowing dark hair, dressed in absolutely nothing but Elena's own expensive silk robe. They were laughing together, a soft, highly intimate, post-coital sound that sent a massive ripple of pure disgust and horror through Elena's entire body. Without any warning, the beautiful woman leaned in closely and placed a slow, highly deliberate, passionate kiss directly on Damien's lips. He responded far too easily, eagerly kissing her back, his strong arms wrapped tightly around her bare waist, exactly like it was second nature to him. There was absolutely not a single moment of hesitation, not even a flicker of guilt. The massive shock struck Elena exactly like a physical punch to the chest, knocking the wind out of her. She nearly dropped the pastry box she was holding, her hands shaking violently. The terrifying thought of the box hitting the hardwood floor and alerting them echoed loudly through the hallway of her mind. The woman, who Elena instantly, sickeningly recognized from photos as Celeste. Lauren, the heiress Maya had warned her about, turned around in surprise at the faint sound of Elena's gasp. Damien stepped back violently, exactly as if he had been physically yanked back into reality. His handsome face shifted rapidly from sheer confusion to absolute, unadulterated horror in a split second as his eyes locked onto his pregnant wife. His lips still glistened wetly from Celeste's kiss. For several endless, agonizing moments, absolutely no one moved a muscle. Elena felt her heart pounding so violently against her ribs, she genuinely wondered if they could hear it, too. Words completely clogged her dry throat, entirely unable to surface. All the faint lipstick stains, the unexplained, cheap cologne, the highly distant, cruel behavior. It hadn't been her wild paranoia at all. It was real. This was cold, undeniable, horrific reality, happening right in front of her very eyes, in her own bed. Elena, Damien finally stammered, his voice cracking with panic, his face pale. Elena, please. It's absolutely not what it looks like. But how on earth could it possibly be anything else? Hot tears instantly welled up in Elena's eyes as she very gently, carefully, placed the pastry box down on the floor, her hands trembling so violently she had to fight to hold herself together. She had just blindly walked directly into the exact kind of devastating betrayal that couldn't possibly be explained away with lies. Celeste, for her part, seemed entirely unfazed by the massive emotional weight of the moment. In fact, she looked vaguely amused by the drama, exactly like a predator who had fully expected this confrontation to happen all along. Her cold gaze dropped dismissively to Elena's rounded, pregnant belly, and she gave a very faint, highly mocking smile before coolly turning to grab her expensive designer purse from the chair. "I'll just leave you two to talk," Celeste said in a syrupy, thick French accent, entirely laced with smugness. She casually slipped into the adjacent master bathroom and shut the heavy door loudly behind her without giving them another glance. The initial, paralyzing shock inside Elena rapidly gave way to a massive, rising wave of blinding fury. She desperately wanted to scream at the top of her lungs, to violently confront them both, to aggressively demand answers for the lies. But instead, she found herself completely frozen in place, choking on silent, racking sobs, violently shaking her head in stunned disbelief. "Why, Damien? Why would you do this to us?" Elena's voice finally cracked as she took a trembling, unsteady step backward toward the hallway. He reached out desperately toward her, exactly as if to touch her arm, to somehow physically stop her from spiraling away from him. "Elena, please, I beg. You. Just listen to me. But she violently pulled away from his reach before he could even finish the sentence. For a highly painful, agonizing second, beautiful images of their life together flooded her mind like a movie reel, the noble charitable causes they proudly championed side by side, their incredibly extravagant, perfect wedding. In Aspen, the growing, innocent life inside her right now. And yet, here stood the man who had solemnly promised before God to protect her heart. Now so, callously, violently breaking it in the very home they once called sacred. "I can't do this. I can't look at you," Elena whispered, heavy tears spilling rapidly down her pale cheeks. In that exact, horrifying moment, she knew with absolute certainty that whatever trust, respect, or love had once existed between them was permanently gone, crushed into dust. She spun sharply on her heel and stormed out of the bedroom, completely ignoring Damien's desperate, pathetic pleas echoing loudly behind her. Down the hall, she reached the private elevator, stabbing the call button repeatedly with shaking fingers until the metal doors finally slid open. As she rapidly descended to the lobby, violent sobs racked her entire body, each one tearing significantly deeper into her soul than the last. She wrapped her arms tightly, protectively around her belly, acting instinctively as if she could physically shield her unborn child from the terrible storm unraveling around them. When she reached the grand lobby, the startled concierge and staff members looked at her tear-streaked face with deep concern, but she quickly brushed past them, stumbling blindly out into the cool night air. A freezing, cold gust of Chicago wind violently slapped her across the face, jolting her slightly out of her traumatized daze. She frantically flagged down a passing yellow cab with a trembling hand, not even knowing where she wanted to go. All she knew for certain was that she had to get out, away from the massive betrayal, away from the toxic lies, and far away from the monster she thought she knew. Somewhere deep in the very back of her chaotic mind, a fierce, new resolve began to slowly form. She absolutely wouldn't crumble into pieces. She wouldn't let her life be defined by Damien's pathetic betrayal. But first, she desperately needed time to think clearly, to meticulously plan, and to legally protect herself and her unborn child. For the very first time since happily marrying him, she fully understood something incredibly terrifying. Damien's massive corporate power and immense wealth could easily be turned against her in a divorce. That dark thought chilled her to the bone nearly as much as the horrific infidelity she had just witnessed. Elena spent that entire, miserable night hiding in a luxury hotel in the heart of the city. Yet, she hardly noticed the plush, expensive bedding, the sweeping skyline views, or the state-of-the-art spa amenities. Absolutely none of it mattered in the face of her total devastation. She endlessly replayed the horrific moment at the penthouse over and over again in her mind, hoping irrationally that the memory might somehow magically end differently. But it never did. Damien's betrayal remained a brutal, immovable, ugly truth. Her phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand with endless text messages and frantic calls from him, but she absolutely couldn't bring herself to answer a single one. She lay curled tightly in a fetal position on the massive bed, her arms protectively cradling her stomach exactly as if she could somehow shield the baby from feeling all of her intense pain. She kept whispering quiet reminders to herself to breathe, to stay calm for the baby's sake, fighting off panic attacks. Through the thick, blinding haze of her heartbreak, she finally managed to dial her best friend, Maya Lin. Maya arrived at the hotel suite within the hour. Without a second of hesitation, she found Elena curled in bed, tear-stained and completely broken, her dark hair a messy tangle, her face incredibly pale. But beneath the overwhelming pain in her eyes, a quiet, fierce determination had already begun to rise. Over steaming mugs of herbal tea, Elena tearfully recounted absolutely every horrific detail of the night. Maya listened intently without judgment, her own eyes blazing with intense anger at the thought of Damien's cruel betrayal. "He absolutely doesn't deserve you," Maya said fiercely, pulling Elena into a firm, highly supportive hug. "You know that, right?" Elena nodded weakly, though she honestly wasn't sure she truly believed it yet. Her shattered heart was a massive, tangled knot of highly conflicting emotions. Burning rage, deep sorrow, total disbelief, and strangely, misplaced guilt. As twisted and illogical as it felt, she simply couldn't stop obsessively wondering if she had somehow done something wrong, if she had somehow failed him as a wife. But that toxic thought didn't last long. Her innate dignity forcefully pushed back against the lie. No, she firmly reminded herself. This was entirely on him, and him alone. He chose to destroy our family. By the very next morning, Damien's desperate calls had turned completely frantic. Voicemail after pathetic voicemail poured into her phone. First came the tearful, begging apologies, followed by panicked, demanding pleas to meet in person to explain. But Elena absolutely did not respond to any of them. She actively hardened her bleeding heart against his manipulative words. She knew she desperately needed a solid plan if she was going to successfully walk away from this marriage and his empire. She had to do it very cleanly, very safely, and in a way that fully, legally protected her future and her unborn child. Her phone buzzed aggressively again. But this time, it absolutely wasn't Damien calling. It was Lorraine Whitmore, Damien's formidable mother. Elena hesitated for a long moment, staring at the screen, then finally answered, her fingers trembling. Lorraine's normally composed voice filled the line, trembling heavily with deep worry. Elena, my dear, please tell me the truth. Is it actually true what Damien just told me? He said you caught him and Celeste together at the apartment. Elena tightly clenched her jaw, the intense grief and humiliation rising all over again. Yes, she managed to say, her voice barely above a raspy whisper. It's entirely true. I honestly don't know what else to do. Lorraine, I'm completely done. I absolutely can't live a life like this. A long, incredibly heavy pause followed on the line. I completely understand, Lorraine said at last, her voice full of genuine pain and disappointment. I am so incredibly sorry. Elena. I never, ever imagined he would betray you like this. I'm trying my best to get to the bottom of it. All with him. But please, if you need absolutely anything, money, lawyers, a place to stay, call me. No matter what happens between you and Damien in court, you will absolutely always be family to me. The kind promise certainly didn't erase the massive pain, but it reminded Elena that she wasn't completely alone in this nightmare. She thanked Lorraine softly, then hung up the phone, sinking deeper into the plush armchair of the hotel. Sweet. The future ahead looked incredibly blurry, exactly like thick fog rolling over a distant ocean horizon. But deep in her heart, a quiet, fierce determination was rapidly building into a storm. 2 agonizing days passed entirely without further contact. Then, somehow, utilizing his vast resources, Damien found out exactly which hotel she was hiding in. He showed up aggressively in the lobby, demanding to see his wife. Hotel security quickly rang her suite from the front desk. Elena could clearly hear his voice shouting through the phone, sounding highly desperate and pleading with the guards. Elena, please, just let me come up and talk to you. We can fix this. Please. Elena remained completely silent on the line. Then, she heard him shout the words that broke the camel's back. I love you. Just think about our baby. Something deep inside her soul violently snapped at the manipulation. She grabbed her cell phone and quickly dialed Damien's direct number. There was absolutely no way she was ever going to let him see her face in person, not after everything he had done. When he answered frantically on the first ring, she cut straight to the point, her voice like ice. I'm only going to say this to you exactly once. Damien, we are completely done. I want a divorce. His panicked, rapid voice tumbled out in heavy gasps. Elena, please. No. Don't. Do this. We can go to expensive therapy. We can fix this. We can. She didn't let him finish the lie. Exactly how long has this affair been going on? A long, terrifying silence followed. She could physically feel the ugly truth hanging heavy and toxic in the air between them before he finally, reluctantly, admitted the truth. A few months. Elena swallowed hard, rapidly blinking through the intense pain. You fully knew. I was pregnant with your child. And you still went behind my back to sleep. With her. Her voice quivered with rage. You actively lied to my face. Damien. Every single day. She was in my house. You could almost physically hear him flinch on the other end of the line. I made a terrible mistake. Elena. No, she snapped sharply, her voice growing significantly steadier. Much firmer. A mistake is forgetting our anniversary. What you did. What you actively kept doing for months. Was a highly calculated choice. They were repeated, conscious, daily choices to be unfaithful to me. I am absolutely not going to subject myself, or our innocent child, to this kind of toxic pain. There was a long pause. Then, he said something she absolutely hadn't expected. Look, we signed the prenup before we got married. You'll be taken care of. Financially. I didn't think you'd ever actually find out about it. Elena froze completely. The cruel, arrogant words hit her significantly harder than she could have ever imagined. So that was his true character. He wasn't just casually cheating. He had coldly calculated absolutely everything. He had actively covered his tracks, fully assumed she'd stay quiet and small if she ever found out, and he genuinely thought his massive amounts of money could easily fix his betrayal. His pathetic protests came in broken waves through the speaker, but Elena made her stance incredibly clear. I will have my lawyer contact your team with the final details. Do not ever call me again unless it is strictly about the babies. Medical care. I absolutely cannot stomach hearing any more of your pathetic excuses. And with that final statement, she hung up the phone. Her whole body shook violently with adrenaline. With one short phone call, she had officially, permanently ended her marriage. The surreal, crushing weight of it all pressed down heavily on her chest. But underneath the immense pain, there was something else blooming, pure relief. She had bravely taken the very first step toward taking her entire life back. The long road ahead of her would be incredibly brutal, messy legal battles, a massive media frenzy, intense emotional turmoil. But she absolutely refused to let Damien's betrayal define who she was to the world. After the call ended, she collapsed onto the hotel bed, sobbing heavily into the expensive silk sheets. Maya sat quietly beside her, silently holding her hand as the tears poured out, offering a steady anchor. Through the intense grief, Elena's mind kept going back to one central, vital thing, the innocent baby growing inside her. She fiercely promised her unborn child something profound right then and there. They would have a much better life. A life completely without lies. A life without toxic pain. She would build that beautiful life for them. Absolutely, no matter how long, expensive, or incredibly difficult the journey ahead would be. Once the highly publicized divorce process officially began, Elena realized very quickly just how incredibly messy and vicious life could become when you were divorcing a powerful billionaire. The aggressive paparazzi stalked her relentlessly, camping outside her hotel, desperate to snap a lucrative photo of the weeping, scorned wife. Vicious clickbait headlines completely filled the tabloids and gossip blogs. Elena Martinez flees cheating tech mogul. Heiress. Designer exposed. Damian Whitmore's mistress revealed. Even highly respected mainstream financial outlets began picking up the scandalous story, aggressively speculating on exactly how the messy divorce might negatively impact Whitmore Supply Chain Innovations' stock price. Elena felt entirely suffocated by it all, the endless gossip, the unwanted attention, the aggressive reporters shouting questions. She desperately longed for a quiet escape. Painful memories haunted absolutely every single corner of Chicago. The beautiful city that had once felt like the absolute pinnacle of Elena's wildest dreams now felt incredibly suffocating, entirely wrapped in a thick blanket of betrayal and pain. She urgently needed to escape. She needed to breathe, to regroup her thoughts, and more than anything else in the world, to protect her unborn child from the highly toxic chaos swirling around them. That is exactly when she made a massive, bold decision. She would leave the country entirely. One of her absolute dearest, oldest friends from her nonprofit days, Adriana Moretti, had successfully relocated to Milan, Italy. Years ago, Adriana worked as a director for a highly renowned, prestigious art gallery that actively partnered with UNESCO. For years, Adriana had been enthusiastically encouraging Elena to come visit her, highly praising the beautiful city's vibrant culture, exquisite food, and rich, highly active philanthropic scene. Now, moving to Milan felt like significantly more than just a fun vacation destination. It felt exactly like salvation. Before fleeing the country, Elena met very quietly and secretly with her high-powered attorney, Brenda Salazar, to finalize the necessary legal steps in the impending divorce. Brenda was incredibly sharp, entirely fearless, and widely known for her aggressive, no-nonsense style in the courtroom. She confidently reassured Elena that she would expertly handle absolutely everything. On the U.S. side, including aggressively blocking any dirty tactics Damian's high-powered, expensive legal team might try to use to intimidate her. After all, Damian may have acted like he wanted things to remain highly civil in the beginning, but when massive amounts of money and fragile male pride were actively involved, even the absolute simplest legal negotiations could quickly become ruthless. Elena's loving parents, Raphael and Carmen, offered her their complete, unconditional support, though they were deeply heartbroken to see their beautiful daughter in such immense pain. They deeply admired her fierce strength. Carmen lovingly, tearfully packed a large batch of Elena's favorite homemade arepas for the long international flight, ultimate comfort food for whenever she inevitably felt homesick or alone. Rafael kissed her forehead tenderly and whispered fiercely in Spanish, "Sé fuerte por tu hijo, mi hija." Be strong for your child, my daughter. With just a few packed suitcases, a thick folder of critical legal documents, and her mother's warm arepas carefully tucked into her carry-on bag, Elena bravely boarded a first-class flight to Milan. As the massive plane lifted smoothly into the night sky, she closed her tired eyes and let the massive wave of conflicting emotions wash entirely over her. Profound relief, terrifying fear, a glimmer of hope, and crushing heartbreak, all tangled tightly together in a messy note. Arriving in Milan physically felt exactly like stepping through a portal into an entirely different world. The city's incredibly grand, historic architecture, crowned beautifully by the majestic Duomo di Milano, deeply stirred something in her soul that had long been dormant. Adriana was waiting excitedly at Malpensa Airport, her arms open wide in greeting. She pulled Elena into a massive, warm hug and whispered fiercely into her ear, "You are completely safe here now." She expertly led Elena to a sleek, black car waiting just outside the terminal, which smoothly whisked them away to a beautiful, cozy, fully furnished apartment located in Milan's historic, artistic Brera district. Over the next few quiet weeks, Elena finally allowed herself to rest and heal. She wandered the ancient, cobblestone streets for hours, happily getting lost in the magic of world-class art galleries, luxury boutiques, and tiny, tucked away trattorias. She stood in absolute, silent awe before Da Vinci's The Last Supper. She treated herself to rich, creamy gelato at charming, sunlit sidewalk cafes. She watched the beautiful sunrise over the Navigli canals, deeply inhaling the comforting scent of fresh, strong espresso and soaking in the vibrant, peaceful hum of local Italian life. Gradually, beautifully, she began to rediscover the pure joy of simple things again. But her massive ambitions absolutely couldn't stay buried for long. Her pregnancy kept her highly grounded, but it also lit a massive fire of urgency deep inside her belly. She had to actively secure a highly stable, prosperous future for herself, but significantly more importantly, for her unborn child. Adriana enthusiastically introduced Elena to several highly influential, wealthy figures within Milan's booming philanthropic and business community. One of them was Giancarlo Benedetti, a highly respected, brilliant venture capitalist with a very sharp instinct for funding highly profitable social enterprises. He took a very particular, keen interest in Elena's highly unique blend of global nonprofit experience and sharp business acumen. Over a long, intense espresso meeting at the Armani Cafe, Giancarlo peppered her with difficult, probing questions about her corporate background. He was incredibly impressed by her massive vision and laser focus. Not long after that meeting, he officially offered her a highly lucrative consulting role at a massive startup incubator he financially supported. The demanding job certainly wasn't glamorous by American billionaire standards. But it was absolutely perfect for Elena right now. She could safely stay in Milan, actively rebuild her professional credibility from scratch, and continue aggressively pursuing her deep passion for humanitarian work. More importantly than anything else, she could do it entirely on her own terms, completely free from Damien's oppressive, looming shadow. Of course, the messy, highly contentious divorce loomed constantly in the dark background of her mind. Every so often, Brenda would send her highly stressful legal updates about the ongoing negotiations, bitter property disputes over mansions, massive spousal support demands, and endless legal wrangling over NDAs. Elena also learned with a heavy heart that Damien was aggressively pushing for 50-50 shared custody of their unborn child. He publicly claimed to the press that he desperately wanted to be involved as a loving father, but Elena deeply suspected his legal maneuvering was significantly more about maintaining control over her than actual care for the child. Still, living in Milan gave her the vital, necessary breathing space she so desperately needed to survive. In many ways, her new life there felt exactly like a beautiful, clean slate. She decorated her historic apartment with highly calming, soft earthy tones, placing vases of fresh, colorful flowers near the large windows. She happily joined a local prenatal yoga class and gradually, organically built a strong, tight-knit circle of support with other expecting expat mothers, women who deeply admired her strength without ever prying into the painful, tabloid wounds of her past. Her belly grew rounder and more prominent with each passing month, serving as a beautiful, living testament to the new life she carried and the quiet, unshakable resilience that bloomed inside her soul. And so officially began Elena's incredible journey abroad. It was a brutal baptism by fire that powerfully ignited a creative spark she hadn't even realized existed within her. Every single step she took away from the smoking ruins of her toxic marriage and toward the bright future she actively envisioned felt exactly like pure freedom. The long road ahead absolutely wouldn't be easy, but she fiercely embraced the terrifying uncertainty with a heart wide open. She was, in every single sense of the word, completely rebuilding herself from the ground up. And she absolutely wasn't going to let anyone, not even a highly vindictive billionaire ex-husband, ever stand in her way again. Life in bustling Milan certainly came with its own set of unique challenges. Of course, but it also gave Elena something she hadn't truly felt in a very long time: profound peace. She lived in a beautiful, cozy apartment featuring a vibrant, floral-covered balcony nestled near the vibrant, bustling Piazza del Duomo. Each morning, she woke up peacefully to the soft, rhythmic chime of ancient church bells and the comforting hum of local street life, a daily soundtrack far gentler and more welcoming than the toxic chaos she had successfully left behind in Chicago. Her demanding new consultancy role at the startup incubator was an absolute whirlwind of brilliant innovation and massive promise. She eagerly began, attending high-stakes pitch sessions where hungry, young entrepreneurs unveiled bold, world-changing ideas, highly eco-friendly fashion lines, AI-driven global health apps, and highly ethical, transparent supply chain platforms. With her highly unique, impressive experience spanning both global philanthropy and cutthroat corporate business, Elena quickly became a highly sought-after, invaluable asset to the teams. Giancarlo Benedetti absolutely noticed her incredible impact. 2. He enthusiastically started introducing her to his highly exclusive, massive network of European investors and powerful corporate leaders, deeply recognizing the immense financial and social value she brought to the table. Day by day, Elena's inner confidence grew massively. She was absolutely no longer just the pregnant, weeping ex-wife of an American tech billionaire. She was a highly respected, powerful professional woman actively rebuilding her own identity, entirely on her own terms. Balancing demanding corporate work and a high-risk pregnancy wasn't easy. Severe morning sickness sometimes violently forced her to politely slip out of important meetings early, and bone-deep fatigue often crept in heavily by the late afternoon. But she stubbornly kept going, entirely driven by fierce determination and the innocent life growing inside her. She regularly saw a highly compassionate, brilliant Italian obstetrician, Dr. Lucia Romano, who warmly encouraged her every single step of the way. Your beautiful baby feels absolutely everything you feel. Elena de Romano gently reminded her at one routine visit, warmly touching her tense shoulder. Please, try your best to let your immense strength and bright optimism lead you both forward. The more Elena deeply immersed herself in Milan's booming startup ecosystem, the more a massive, bold new idea began to fully form in her mind. She desperately wanted to create something entirely of her own, a massive, global venture that perfectly merged advanced technology, massive global impact, and her deep passion for humanitarian work. She thought critically back to her exhausting days working alongside Damien, especially recalling the massive, constant, logistical hurdles that nonprofits constantly faced when trying to desperately get life-saving medical supplies or basic educational materials into remote, war-torn areas. What if she could permanently change that broken system? What if she built an advanced tech platform to completely simplify and streamline those critical delivery efforts, making it significantly easier, faster, and vastly more cost-effective for life-saving aid to actually reach those in desperate need? Fueled entirely by this massive, world-changing vision, Elena spent her quiet evenings obsessively sketching out business ideas, doing deep market research, and actively leveraging her new, powerful European network. Adriana, always remaining her biggest, loudest supporter, listened eagerly to her pitches and quickly introduced her to highly influential, like-minded tech collaborators. Giancarlo eagerly arranged casual, late-night brainstorming sessions, offering highly thoughtful feedback and brutal, invaluable business insight. Bit by bit, Elena's massive new venture began to take actual form. She proudly named it Global Bridge. It was a highly advanced tech platform specifically designed to seamlessly connect global nonprofits with heavily vetted, ethical shipping partners, offering total supply chain transparency, absolute reliability, and massive cost efficiency in global aid delivery. One of the biggest, most terrifying milestones came when Elena formally pitched Global Bridge at a highly exclusive, small networking event in Milan. Standing confidently before a dozen billionaire investors and powerful NGO leaders, her pregnant belly highly visible beneath a sleek, professional black dress, Elena felt a massive flutter of nerves. But she expertly steadied herself, drawing heavily on absolutely everything she'd learned from Damien's world. She spoke passionately and flawlessly about the massive global impact Global Bridge could have, actively closing the dangerous logistical gaps that too often slowed down critical aid. She explained how life-saving supplies like vaccines, textbooks, and disaster relief goods could be delivered significantly more effectively, much faster, and at a drastically lower cost to the charities. By the end of her flawless pitch, the entire room was absolutely buzzing with intense interest. A few skeptical attendees aggressively jotted down notes. 1. Highly intimidating, middle-aged venture capitalist from Paris, Marc Duval, asked her incredibly sharp, aggressive questions about corporate scalability and long-term profitability. Elena responded incredibly calmly, brilliantly, outlining exactly how integrating advanced data analytics and AI would massively streamline operations and drastically reduce overhead costs. The NGO representatives sitting in the room were especially intrigued by the platform's potential for real-time shipment tracking and rapid resource allocation. By the end of the grueling session, Elena had collected a thick stack of expensive business cards and secured several immediate requests for high-level follow-up meetings. That night, she happily returned to her apartment absolutely buzzing with adrenaline and excitement. She replayed the successful pitch over and over in her head, smiling widely every single time she remembered the affirming nods and high praise from the investors. For the very first time in what felt like forever, she truly, deeply believed she could build something massive and meaningful, something that was entirely hers, completely untouched by Damien's toxic influence or his dirty money. Of course, the dark, looming shadow of her highly contentious, ongoing divorce still cast a pall over her joy. Every so often, Brenda would send her highly stressful legal updates about Damien's constantly shifting, aggressive strategies. He had recently offered an incredibly generous, multi-million-dollar financial settlement in exchange for a very quiet, completely uncontested divorce. But naturally, it came heavily burdened with toxic strings attached. He demanded full 50-50 paternal rights and a highly restrictive Proposed. International visitation schedule. Elena was deeply torn. She desperately wanted to move on from him forever. But a massive part of her deeply feared that allowing Damien any legal foothold in her new life, even as a father, could actively jeopardize absolutely everything she was trying to rebuild. One sleepless, anxious night, her cell phone rang highly unexpectedly. It was Lorraine Whitmore. "I just really wanted to check on you, my dear," Lorraine said very gently, her voice sounding tired. "The media coverage here in the States has been absolutely relentless and cruel. I'm incredibly worried about your health and the baby." Elena exhaled a long breath, a chaotic swirl of conflicting emotions rising in her chest. She genuinely appreciated Lorraine's maternal concern. Truly. But she also intimately knew that the powerful Whitmore name and absolutely everything it represented could never be fully separated from Damien's toxicity. Still, Lorraine's tone sounded incredibly sincere. "I'm coping very well," Elena replied politely. "Living in Milan has been incredibly good for my soul." There was a long, heavy pause on the line. Then, Lorraine's voice softened even further. "I truly hope that one day you can somehow find it in your heart to forgive him," she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "He's my only soul, and I'll absolutely always love him. But I intimately know that he has hurt you incredibly deeply. Forgiveness felt absolutely impossible right now. It was a distant, unreachable concept. The brutal betrayal still sat incredibly raw and entirely unhealed beneath Elena's calm, professional surface. "I'm absolutely not there yet, Lorraine," she answered very quietly, but firmly. "But thank you for calling to check on me." After the call ended, Elena stood up and stared deeply at her reflection in the dark apartment window. The beautiful city lights sparkled brilliantly behind her, but what she focused entirely on was her own physical posture. She looked incredibly calm, deeply grounded, and undeniably steady. She realized in that moment exactly how much she had fundamentally changed. The old Elena might have collapsed in tears or spiraled into panic after that call. But the powerful woman she was rapidly becoming, she was actively building something truly remarkable. Even the baby, who gave a gentle, reassuring nudge inside her belly, seemed to recognize the massive shift in her energy. Elena placed a warm hand protectively over her bump and allowed herself a quiet, deeply hopeful smile. With each passing day, her massive new venture in Milan was taking much clearer shape. She successfully began to attract a highly talented, passionate core team, brilliant tech developers, expert logistics strategists, and highly seasoned philanthropic advisors. Each and every one of them was drawn to Elena's powerful vision and unyielding determination. By the time her second trimester came to a close, she had successfully secured her massive first round of seed funding. It absolutely wasn't anywhere near the billions Damien commanded back in the States, but it was hers. Entirely. 100% hers. In quiet moments, Elena sometimes worried if Damien might try to aggressively sabotage her business efforts out of spite, or worse, attempt a hostile takeover, to co-opt her successful venture for his own financial gain. But as she proudly watched her small company roar to life step by step, she realized something incredibly powerful. She absolutely no longer feared him or his money. She was quite literally actively shaping a brand new future, one that absolutely didn't revolve around him, his famous name, or his toxic legacy. Yes, she was pregnant and alone. Yes, she had been brutally betrayed. And yes, she was very far from her original home. But she had absolutely never felt more alive. That incredible sense of forward momentum, however, didn't last long. Just as Elena formally finalized a massive pilot deal with a mid-sized international NGO, she received devastating word that one of her key anchor investors had abruptly pulled out of the deal, vaguely citing potential reputational complications. Later that same day, Brenda called and confirmed exactly what she feared most. Someone highly placed from Damien's aggressive legal team had quietly and maliciously contacted the investors, aggressively questioning the strict legality of her corporate operations abroad while heavily involved in an active international custody dispute. It wasn't just highly personal anymore. It was all-out professional sabotage. The vibrant sun was setting beautifully over the Navigli canals in Milan when Elena's phone rang loudly, violently shattering her newfound peace. On the other end of the line, Brenda's usually calm, collected voice carried a sharp edge of extreme urgency. Damien is officially contesting the divorce settlement, she said sharply. Not bothering with pleasantries. He's also just filed a highly aggressive federal petition to legally compel your immediate return to the U.S. for all custody-related hearings. Elena's stomach violently dropped to the floor. Clutching the phone tightly, she began pacing the length of her living room, the golden dusk light spilling warmly across the tiled floor, mocking her panic. He did what? After absolutely everything he did to me, now he wants to drag me, kicking and screaming back to a courtroom in Chicago. Her voice shook with a potent mix of total disbelief and blinding fury. She had deeply hoped, naively perhaps, that Damien would eventually settle things with some shred of grace, especially given the massive public backlash he was still actively facing in the press after the scandal broke. But apparently, he was aggressively changing tactics. Brenda quickly explained that Damien's ruthless legal team was actively portraying Elena's move to Italy as a malicious act of parental alienation, a highly calculated, illegal attempt to keep him far away from his unborn child. They were aggressively framing her relocation to the judge as bitter and entirely vengeful. We can absolutely fight this, Elena, Brenda reassured her, her voice firm. You're absolutely not hiding from him. You're actively building a highly legitimate, successful career there. You've officially established legal residency. You desperately needed physical space to protect yourself and your unborn child from media harassment. The law will clearly see that. But we absolutely need to be fully ready for a brutal, drawn-out legal fight. He's actively trying to hit me from all angles. Brenda, Elena muttered, rubbing her temples. Not just in family court, but in business. He deliberately wants to scare off my financial backers. He wants to actively undermine absolutely everything I'm building here. A massive wave of cold dread swept completely over Elena. She had bravely come to Milan to heal in peace, to rebuild her shattered life, to start completely over, not to get violently dragged into a messy transatlantic legal war. The horrifying idea of physically facing Damien in a courtroom again, while heavily pregnant, filled her with deep unease. But as Brenda calmly laid out their aggressive counterlegal strategy, a highly familiar, fierce fire reignited inside her belly. No, she absolutely wouldn't allow Damien, or anyone else, to dictate the terms of her life ever again. Over the highly stressful weeks that followed, the legal pressure escalated dramatically. Damien's aggressive attorneys began flooding her inbox with endless legal notices and demands. Another highly aggressive letter arrived via courier, this time demanding extensive, invasive documentation of Elena's personal living expenses in Milan, highly sensitive financial details about Global Bridge, and even demanding copies of all her private medical records regarding her pregnancy. The extreme invasiveness of it all felt exactly like a physical violation, a highly manipulative, abusive power move cleverly disguised as standard legal formality. But Elena did her absolute best to remain completely grounded, fiercely keeping her intense focus on her rapidly growing company and the rapidly approaching due date. She had come entirely too far to allow his fear tactics to pull her backward into the dark. Then, in a massive, highly aggressive move that completely blindsided her, Damien showed up in Milan entirely unannounced. She first heard the terrifying news from Adriana, who frantically called her. After spotting him stepping out of a car outside Palazzo Real during a high-end fashion exhibit, Elena's stomach dropped to her shoes. She had absolutely dreaded the terrifying possibility of an in-person confrontation, and now it was totally inevitable. 2 days later, it finally happened. From her apartment balcony, she spotted a sleek, black luxury town car pulling up smoothly outside her building. Damien stepped out, closely flanked by 2 massive men in tailored suits, highly paid. Private security, no doubt. Her heart pounded violently against her ribs. She rushed frantically downstairs to the lobby, absolutely not wanting him to forcefully cause a scene and push his way into her private home. She desperately needed to control this explosive situation on her own terms. When the elevator doors slid open to the lobby, she immediately saw him pacing anxiously near the grand entrance. He looked both incredibly exhausted and highly determined. He wore a sharp, custom navy suit, his dark hair styled perfectly, looking every inch the handsome man she had once fallen deeply for. The poised, magnetic, untouchable entrepreneur. For a brief, agonizing second, it almost felt comfortingly familiar. Then she quickly remembered Celeste's smug, painted smile, the profound betrayal, the endless nights of suffocating silence and unanswered, gaslighting questions. "Elena," he said, quickly turning toward her. His eyes immediately dropped down to stare at her highly pregnant belly, and a flash of undeniable, raw pain crossed his handsome face. You look incredibly well." She firmly folded her arms over her stomach in a highly protective stance, her voice ringing out like cold steel. "What the hell are you doing here, Damien?" He stepped a little closer, significantly lowering his voice. "Can we please talk privately for a minute?" She nodded stiffly and led him toward a much quieter, secluded corner of the hotel lobby, safely away from prying, curious eyes. "I absolutely do not appreciate you showing up here unannounced like this," she said, her tone sharp as a razor. "If you desperately needed to see me, you could have legally gone through my lawyer." Damien sighed heavily, running a stressed hand through his neatly styled hair. "Elena, please. This is incredibly important to me. I know I've made terrible mistakes, horrible, unforgivable ones. But I absolutely don't want to lose you. Or lose my child." His voice actually cracked on the last word. "Please. Just let me try to fix this mess." Her dormant anger ignited, fierce, hot, and entirely unwavering. She pressed a hand protectively against her belly. "You absolutely do not get to just fly a private jet to Milan and play the role of the sad, regretful husband, Damien. You made your own bed." "Literally," Elena said coldly. "I am completely done being your convenient afterthought." Damien's jaw tightened in frustration. "I was under immense, crushing corporate pressure. Okay. The company going public, the massive global expansions. I completely lost sight of what truly mattered in life. Celeste was just a distraction. A stupid, meaningless one. But that absolutely doesn't mean I don't still love you." Elena let out a highly bitter, mocking laugh. "You have an incredibly twisted, sick way of showing your love." They stood there in heavy, suffocating silence, the highly polished marble floor. Beneath them seemingly cast back a highly fractured, distorted reflection of their confrontation, like some warped, funhouse version of the beautiful life they once shared. Finally, realizing his charm wasn't working, Damien stepped back, his voice lowering to a business tone. "I'm entirely willing to settle the divorce highly amicably right now," he said. "I desperately want to provide for you and for the baby financially. But I also absolutely want to be a prominent part of my child's life. I need your absolute guarantee that you won't legally shut me out Elena studied his face incredibly closely, her eyes narrowing in deep suspicion. Was this sudden offer genuine sincerity, or just another highly calculated, manipulative legal move? But even through the blinding anger, she simply couldn't deny one objective truth. Their child was biologically half Damien's. Unless he gave her concrete, legal reason to believe he was physically unfit, she couldn't legally or morally keep him away forever. "I'm not trying to maliciously shut you out of the baby's life," she said. Finally, her tone highly guarded but surprisingly calm. "But you completely destroyed the foundational trust between us. And now you're actively fighting me. In family court, you literally tried to legally force me to move back to the States." Damien nodded slowly, a flicker of genuine guilt flashing across his tired face. "My lead lawyer strongly said it was the most highly strategic move to make. I just..." He paused, letting out a long, heavy, defeated breath. "Maybe we can finally find a fair compromise. I will completely drop the hostile custody petition today if you just let me be there for the actual birth. Let me be a real father." His heavy words lingered in the tense air, stirring a massive, chaotic storm of highly conflicted feelings inside her. After absolutely everything he had put her through, a massive part of her fiercely wanted to permanently shut the heavy door on his face forever. But another, softer part deep down knew that if he truly, genuinely committed to fatherhood, it could fundamentally change him. And it might profoundly matter to the child one day to know their father tried. "I'll think about it," Elena said at last, her voice tight with emotion. "But don't you ever show up here again without proper notice. And don't ever try to aggressively control my life with legal threats again. I am proudly building a completely new life for myself here in Milan, and I absolutely won't let you or your lawyers sabotage it." A flicker of deep remorse crossed Damien's handsome face. "I understand. Completely," he said quietly. He hesitated for a long moment, then gave a highly strained, almost broken smile. "You look incredibly radiant. By the way, pregnancy really suits you." Elena didn't bother to respond to the compliment. She turned her back and walked away before her iron resolve could falter. Without another word, Damien slowly left the lobby, his massive bodyguards closely flanking him as he disappeared through the revolving glass doors. Elena stood entirely alone in the lobby, the heavy silence settling comfortably around her like thick fog. She exhaled a very shaky breath, hot tears stinging sharply behind her eyes. Despite her fierce outward composure, the intense confrontation had left Elena deeply rattled. She finally realized that fully legally disentangling herself from Damien's life would be far more emotionally difficult than she had ever imagined. But she also understood something vastly more important. Her life absolutely no longer revolved around his approval or his wealth. She had global bridge. She had incredible, supportive new friendships. And she had the incredibly bright promise of a future that was completely hers, and hers alone. Damien's sudden, aggressive arrival in Milan may have temporarily threatened her hard-won peace. But it absolutely wouldn't detail her success. The dark storm had followed her, entirely across an ocean, but she absolutely would not drown in it. She would proudly rise above it, just as she always had, and fiercely protect the beautiful life she was actively building. What had truly shocked her the most about the lobby encounter wasn't just his sudden physical presence, but the man closely trailing right behind him, a sharply dressed, high-powered corporate attorney holding a thick, leather-bound legal folder. Damien absolutely hadn't just come across the ocean to talk. He'd come armed with legal papers, with calculated strategy, and with immense pressure. "You can carefully review this settlement offer with your lawyer," he'd said, sliding the heavy folder across the marble table of the hotel cafe earlier. "But I'd much rather just settle this quietly, for the sake of the baby." It was a highly manipulative trap cloaked in faux paternal concern, one that Elena fiercely refused to fall into. Her voice was cold steel when she forcefully pushed the folder right back toward his chest. "If you want absolutely anything from me, speak directly to Brenda. Don't ever show up to my home like this again." Fueled entirely by that renewed, fiery determination, Elena doubled down on her intense focus at Global Bridge. It became almost a physical act of absolute defiance, as though each and every corporate milestone she achieved, each massive step forward she took, was yet another impenetrable brick wall, successfully built between her and the toxic chaos Damien constantly stirred up. She dove headfirst into high-stakes investor meetings, grueling product development sessions, and strict prenatal care with a relentless, unstoppable purpose. Her long workdays unfolded at a highly vibrant, energetic co-working space located near the trendy Corso Garibaldi. Its exposed brick walls were brightly adorned with massive world maps and inspiring motivational murals painted in bold colors. Her dedicated team, which was once just a few passionate part-timers, had massively grown into a highly solid, cohesive unit of 8 brilliant people. The tech developers eagerly worked late into the night, endlessly refining complex AI algorithms that seamlessly connected NGOs to heavily vetted, ethical global shipping partners. Elena meticulously oversaw the prototype beta testing, gathered invaluable user feedback, and watched with immense, glowing pride as Global Bridge rapidly blossomed into a highly real, beautifully functioning tech platform. The thrilling day they finally launched their private beta version, she excitedly treated her entire team to massive amounts of pizza at a cozy, family-owned neighborhood pizzeria. It was a highly humble, joyful, genuine celebration that felt absolute worlds away from the shallow, champagne-drenched, fake corporate parties of her old life in Chicago. Still, amid the massive exhilaration of successfully building something entirely new, Elena simply couldn't ignore the pressing physical realities of her pregnancy. Now well into her heavy third trimester, Her belly was incredibly prominent, and her physical energy dipped much more quickly. Her ankles swelled painfully by noon, and quality sleep only came in very short, highly uncomfortable bursts. Dr. Lucia Romano strongly advised her to immediately slow her pace down and prioritize rest, though it went completely against her driven Type A nature. Elena finally took the medical advice to heart. She intelligently adjusted her work schedule, effectively delegated significantly more tasks to her growing leadership team, and purposefully carved out quiet time for long daily walks around Parco Sempione, a lush, beautiful green retreat where she could breathe deeply, reflect, and gently reconnect with her changing body. On one such sunny afternoon walk, Giancarlo Benedetti happily joined her. They strolled comfortably side by side along the winding dirt paths, passing beneath tall, gently swaying trees. Happy birds chirped loudly from above, and a very soft, warm breeze danced through the autumn foliage, lending a highly peaceful, calming rhythm to their conversation. "I am so incredibly proud of exactly how far you've come," Giancarlo said, warmly, his hands casually tucked in his pockets as they walked. Global Bridge truly has massive, real-world potential. We've currently got several major global NGOs highly eager to officially join the platform once the beta testing successfully wraps up. Elena smiled widely, her beautiful face lighting up with quiet, fierce pride. "It's honestly been an absolute whirlwind. Sometimes I genuinely can't even believe how drastically different my life is now compared to a year ago." He nodded thoughtfully, looking at her profile. "It absolutely suits you. You're completely not just Damian Whitmore's ex-wife anymore. You are Elena Martinez, a massive, unstoppable force entirely in your own right." Her facial expression softened, a hint of genuine humor in her voice. "A highly pregnant force to be reckoned with. At least," she said, gently and lovingly, resting a hand on her large belly. Giancarlo laughed out loud. "That only adds to your incredible mystique in the boardrooms." Their professional companionship had organically, beautifully grown into a deep friendship that Elena highly cherished. He absolutely never pried into her dark past with Damian, though he clearly understood the gravity of the situation from the press. Their strong bond was built entirely on mutual professional respect, shared ambition, and an unspoken, respectful agreement that some deep emotional wounds simply need significant time and space to heal. A few days later, Elena attended a highly routine prenatal appointment and received somewhat unexpected medical news. Her baby was currently measuring very large and incredibly healthy. Dr. Lucia Romano casually mentioned the very real possibility of an early delivery. Instead of feeling blind panic or fear, Elena actually felt a massive thrill of pure excitement, perfectly tempered by just the right amount of normal, first-time mother nerves. She was about to actually become a mother. That profound truth, that massive life transformation. Now, completely eclipsed every single stressful business deal and every single emotional scar she carried from her past. The following month passed in an absolute blur of frantic preparations. Adriana happily helped her beautifully decorate the nursery, a highly cheerful, sunny, little room painted in calming pastel yellows. The walls were lovingly adorned with whimsical, hand-painted hot air balloons and playful safari animals. Elena eagerly ordered a sleek, highly expensive, handcrafted Italian wooden crib, and stocked up heavily on all the basic baby essentials, fiercely determined to embrace single motherhood with both immense grace and total independence. Meanwhile, legal updates from Brenda back in the U.S. finally brought some cautious, much-needed relief. Damien's highly aggressive legal team had surprisingly softened their combative position, perhaps heavily influenced by the raw, emotional conversation they had shared in the Milan lobby. He was absolutely no longer legally insisting she return stateside immediately, though he still formally requested a strict, formal custody agreement to be drafted. Once the baby was born, Elena highly dreaded the terrifying thought of post-birth legal negotiations, but part of her felt immensely relieved that the tensions hadn't violently escalated into a full-blown international court battle. Then, completely without warning, it finally happened. At exactly 2 a.m., Elena felt the very first sharp contractions. The early physical signs were absolutely unmistakable. Adriana and Giancarlo frantically rushed her to the hospital in the middle of the night, both of them remaining incredibly close and supportive as she was formally admitted into a brightly lit, sterile delivery room. The atmosphere in the room was completely filled with intense tension and profound tenderness. Medical monitors blinked rhythmically, voices remained hushed but highly alert, and the nurses and midwives worked incredibly calmly and quickly. She labored exhaustingly through hours of deep, bone-rattling physical pain. Time completely blurred into a dizzying, confusing mix of focused breathing techniques, whispered words of encouragement, and steady, supportive hands tightly gripping hers. And then, at long last, the delivery room completely filled with the incredibly sharp, powerful, beautiful wail of a newborn child. The newborn's loud cry filled the entire room, piercing, strong, and absolutely pure. Elena gazed down tearfully at her tiny, perfect daughter, who was tightly swaddled in a soft, warm hospital blanket. Dark, fine hair clung wetly to the baby's delicate scalp, and her tiny eyes squinted tightly against the harsh hospital lights. Hot tears completely blurred Elena's vision. Every single past heartbreak, every single brutal betrayal, every single lonely, sleepless night, absolutely all of it seemed to magically melt away in a single, awestruck moment of profound love and overwhelming gratitude. She proudly named her daughter Solana, a beautiful tribute to the bright sunshine that had once lit her path back in California, and a powerful symbol of the radiant, warm new beginning officially blooming inside her healed heart. cradling baby Solana incredibly gently in her tired arms. Elena kissed the baby's incredibly soft forehead, fiercely whispering promises of a beautiful life entirely filled with deep security, pure joy, and absolute freedom from the dark shadows of the past. Adriana and Giancarlo stood quietly nearby in the room, tears shining brightly in their eyes. It profoundly felt, in that beautiful moment, exactly like a small, highly supportive family had formed. Entirely around her, not one bound by traditional blood, but bound entirely by fierce loyalty, profound love, and absolute choice. In that quiet, sterile hospital room in Milan, Elena finally realized she absolutely hadn't just built a highly successful business. She had successfully created an entirely new kind of empire, one firmly built on highly meaningful friendships, deep, purpose-driven work, and a bright future she entirely, completely controlled. Long after the official visiting hours ended and the guests left, she sat in absolute silence, peacefully watching Solana sleep in her arms. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell in a perfectly soft rhythm, and Elena deeply marveled at exactly how much had profoundly changed in such a remarkably short amount of time. She was absolutely no longer just the pathetic, betrayed wife of a tech billionaire. She was a fierce mother. She was a highly successful entrepreneur. She was a powerful woman who absolutely no longer needed validation from anyone else in the world to know her immense worth. As she finally drifted off to a deep sleep, incredibly exhausted but profoundly elated, she clung tightly to one profound, undeniable truth, no matter exactly how stormy the seas of life may ever be in the future. She now absolutely possessed the immense inner strength to confidently chart her own course. A beautiful course guided entirely by pure love, fierce ambition, and absolute, unwavering hope. Balancing new motherhood with running a rapidly budding tech startup heavily tested Elena's physical and mental limits daily. She took highly important late-night investor calls while gently rocking Solana to sleep in her arms. She frantically squeezed in complex product development meetings during the brief moments between diaper changes and feedings. She rarely slept more than 4 hours a night, but she absolutely never, ever gave up. Actively watching global bridge gain massive global traction gave her the necessary energy to relentlessly push forward. Following a highly successful series of global beta tests, major international nonprofits loudly praised the platform's incredible effectiveness in rapidly delivering life-saving aid to remote, dangerous areas. Powerful venture. Capitalists saw massive, scalable financial potential in the tech. Elena threw herself entirely into perfecting the code, fiercely driven by a deep core belief that better, faster logistics could completely transform global humanitarian work forever. But massive progress absolutely never came without serious resistance. Damien abruptly re-emerged in her life, aggressively demanding a highly prominent role in Solana's life. Extremely messy, highly expensive legal battles rapidly followed as he pushed aggressively in family court for highly favorable custody arrangements, fiercely determined to entirely protect her daughter's peace. Elena held incredibly firm, rigidly negotiating absolutely only through her ruthless attorney, and strictly on her own, unyielding terms. The emotional weight of the battle was incredibly real, but she absolutely refused to let Damien's toxic interference distract her from the much bigger global mission. Then came the absolute next major, career-defining milestone. Elena was formally invited to publicly present Global Bridge at a massive, highly prestigious social impact conference held in Berlin. She confidently boarded the flight with baby Solana in tow, with the fiercely loyal Adriana right beside her, remaining as unwavering as ever. And when Elena confidently stood on that massive global stage, entirely holding her own against industry titans, she presented highly detailed, real-world case studies, real, massive impact, real, undeniable success, life-saving aid, successfully delivered significantly faster and much more affordably to global crisis zones. Elena brilliantly outlined her massive, ambitious vision for rapidly scaling Global Bridge into entirely new, unexplored regions, actively partnering with even more global nonprofits and massive government agencies worldwide. The elite audience's highly enthusiastic, roaring response nearly brought her to happy tears on stage. In that beautiful, validating moment, she finally felt completely vindicated. Her immense pain, her massive corporate setbacks, her brutal heartbreak, they absolutely hadn't derailed her life. They had perfectly shaped her into exactly who she needed to be. Immediately after the highly successful presentation, a massive crowd of highly interested, wealthy collaborators eagerly surrounded her, desperate to learn significantly more and to financially be part of something truly meaningful. From the high stage, Elena caught a brief sight of Adriana standing proudly in the very back of the massive room, gently rocking a sleeping Solana in her arms. A massive, overwhelming wave of pure gratitude swelled deeply in Elena's chest. Her beautiful daughter was her absolute greatest, highest purpose in life, a living, breathing symbol of complete rebirth, of a life successfully rebuilt, incredibly far away from toxic betrayal, and incredibly far away from fear. Later that exact evening, relaxing back at the luxury hotel suite, a dedicated Global Bridge team member happily handed her a freshly printed letter that had just arrived via one of their NGO partners. It was written directly from a desperately overworked nurse actively stationed at a dangerous field hospital in war-torn Syria. The handwritten letter was incredibly short, but its powerful words struck her incredibly deep in her soul. Your incredible platform successfully delivered critical insulin to us in just 3 days. You literally saved a dozen children's lives today. We honestly didn't think absolutely anyone was coming to help us. But you came. Elena sat heavily on the edge of the hotel bed, holding a sleeping Solana incredibly close to her chest, happy tears running completely silently down her face. It was the exact, profound moment she finally, truly understood. This platform was significantly bigger than her. It was vastly bigger than her past pain. This was her true, ultimate purpose in life. Back home in Milan, Elena dove headfirst into her work once again with renewed, explosive vigor. Every single new corporate partnership signed, every single new global NGO successfully onboarded to the tech platform, strongly reminded her of exactly just how incredibly far she had come. Though intense legal negotiations with Damien remained ongoing and were occasionally highly tense, her laser focus absolutely never wavered for a second. She was fiercely, proudly raising Solana in a beautiful, highly curated world of pure love, total stability, and absolute financial independence. And with Global Bridge rapidly expanding globally, Elena could physically feel it in her bones. She was actively on the absolute verge of something vastly bigger than just a highly successful business. She was actively building a permanent, global legacy. In the busy months immediately following Solana's birth, Elena beautifully tapped into a massive well of strength she absolutely never knew she possessed. Global Bridge literally exploded in global popularity. Top-tier nonprofits praised its massive efficiency in the press. Billionaire investors saw massive, highly scalable financial potential. Major global media outlets eagerly ran highly flattering feature stories on Elena, absolutely no longer referring to her as the pathetic, scorned ex-wife of a tech billionaire, but proudly as a brilliant rising star in global social innovation. In Milan, utilizing her newfound wealth, she happily upgraded to a much larger, beautiful apartment, completely creating a massive, bright, sunny nursery for Solana, and a highly sleek, modern home office where she expertly managed her rapidly growing global team across multiple time zones. Damien still remained in the picture, but strictly on her terms alone. Highly supervised, monthly video calls gave him very limited, controlled access to see Solana. But Elena's new life was entirely hers to shape now. And then came her absolute, ultimate global breakthrough. Amal Clooney personally invited her to speak directly at the highly prestigious World Philanthropy Summit held in Geneva, a massive, highly exclusive global gathering of powerful diplomats, famous changemakers, and billionaire humanitarians. Elena knew instantly that this was significantly more than just another speaking engagement. This was her absolute defining moment on the world stage. Stepping confidently onto the highly polished platform of the massive summit hall, she boldly faced a vast room entirely filled with highly influential global leaders, brilliant global thinkers, and high-profile celebrity philanthropists. Her clear voice calm and perfectly steady, Elena began her highly anticipated keynote address, a highly concise but incredibly powerful journey through her mission to completely streamline global humanitarian logistics, beautifully layered with highly personal stories of human resilience and ultimate rebirth. She shared massive, real-world data examples, exactly how Global Bridge had successfully cut global delivery times in half, exactly how it had connected life-saving vaccines and crucial relief supplies to some of the absolute most remote, dangerous corners of the world. High-definition photos flashed brilliantly on the massive screen behind her. Complex data graphs revealed undeniable, massive impact. Deeply human stories brought the cold data to life. For the audience, her powerful closing line was delivered softly, but it was absolutely unforgettable to everyone in the room. Efficient logistics can truly unite our fractured world. Because when life-saving aid moves faster, true hope arrives sooner. The entire elite audience rose instantly in thunderous, standing applause. Hot tears stung Elena's eyes, absolutely not from sadness, but from pure, undeniable triumph. She had completely, successfully rewritten the entire story of her life. She was absolutely no longer just a woman who had survived a brutal betrayal. She was a massive builder of bridges. She was a devoted mother. She was a brilliant visionary. And she was a highly respected, powerful voice for massive transformation on the global stage, actively healing a highly fractured world, exactly one shipment at a time. The deafening applause was truly thunderous. Immediately after her flawless presentation concluded, massive luminaries from global NGOs, powerful humanitarian coalitions, and top-tier global investment firms eagerly lined up to meet her, desperately eager to discuss highly lucrative, long-term partnerships with Global Bridge. Amid the highly enthusiastic, non-stop handshakes and the endless exchanged business cards, Elena suddenly spotted Adriana standing proudly in the very back of the massive room, gently rocking a sleeping Solana in her arms. The beautiful sight of her sweet daughter, so incredibly small, so perfectly peaceful, resting comfortably right in the absolute heart of such an incredibly powerful, intimidating space, filled Elena with a massive rush of pure gratitude so incredibly deep it nearly brought her to her knees in tears. That night, back in her luxurious Geneva hotel suite, Elena sat peacefully by the large window with a sleeping Solana safely nestled against her chest. The brilliant city lights twinkled brightly outside the glass. Her healed heart swelled with immense pride. From crushing heartbreak and brutal betrayal to finding massive purpose, ultimate power, and profound peace. She had completely rewritten her story, not just to save herself, but to provide for her beautiful daughter, and to actively help a struggling world that desperately needed entirely new ways to find hope. What had initially began merely as an act of desperate survival had successfully become something infinitely more profound, a massive legacy of bright light. It was a beautiful life proudly built entirely from the gray ashes, significantly stronger, vastly freer, and undeniably 100% her own. As little Solana stirred very gently in her sleep, Elena looked out over the quiet, glittering skyline and whispered softly into the night. One day, my sweet girl, you'll finally understand exactly why I bravely walked away from it all, and exactly how incredibly far we came together. Outside the window, the cool wind shifted direction, gently rustling the expensive curtains exactly like a warm promise. The absolute next chapter of her life hadn't even been written yet, but for the very first time in her life, Elena absolutely couldn't wait to see exactly what amazing things came next. Thank you all so incredibly much for joining us on this truly incredible, emotional journey of deep heartbreak, fierce resilience, and ultimate, beautiful transformation. Elena's incredibly inspiring story serves as a powerful, vital reminder that absolutely no matter how incredibly dark and terrifying the storm may be, we each currently carry the immense, raw strength inside us to ultimately rise above it all. Through surviving brutal betrayal, a messy, highly public divorce, and the total collapse of her supposed fairy tale life, she successfully built a massive, powerful global empire firmly rooted in true purpose. She built it entirely on foreign soil, but she built it strictly on her own, unwavering terms. She absolutely wasn't just quietly rebuilding her life, she was actively becoming a new person. And in doing so, she clearly showed the entire world, and vastly more importantly, she proved to herself that true, lasting inner strength absolutely doesn't come from maintaining a fake image of perfection, but it comes entirely from sheer, unrelenting perseverance. If Elena's incredible journey successfully lit a massive fire in your soul today, if it powerfully reminded you of your own immense, hidden inner power, please hit that like button on this video. Share this highly emotional, empowering story with someone in your life who really desperately needs to hear this message today. And please, be absolutely sure to subscribe to our channel right now for more incredibly real, highly powerful stories that will inspire bold comebacks and fearless personal reinventions in your own life. Your continued amazing support is exactly what helps us keep this wonderful community rapidly growing, and you are exactly what makes it so extraordinary. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, keep rising.